Hello and welcome to Jeff Tomchik's assignment 4 for Design Tools. For this assignment, I decided to take a look back at World War II and answer the question, despite Nazi Germany having a commanding lead at the beginning of the war, what defining aspect caused them to fail in the end? So my thesis for this assignment is that it was actually Hitler's arrogance that led to the Nazi Empire's downfall. It was his arrogance that allowed him to underestimate his opponents, bite off more than he could handle, and expand his empire too quickly for him to be able to control. So this is a map of the early Nazi Empire, and it kind of shows them spreading all across Europe, which is kind of how he expected the whole entire war to go. But obviously history tells of a different outcome, and I kind of want to just talk about what events led to that outcome. So the first act that led to the Nazi Empire's fall was Hitler's decision to invade Russia. He did this in an attempt to expand his northern territory, and he failed because he greatly underestimated the Russian troops and the Russian winter. So the Nazi Empire lost a very large number of resources and troops in this northern war, and they also gained a very powerful enemy, who greatly attributed to their eventual downfall. Now, instead of attacking Russia, Hitler could have had Russia remain an ally and have them protect their northern border, which would eliminate a front, and they could probably also use Russia's large supply of troops later on in the war when they needed more manpower. So this second act I want to talk about is the Battle of Britain, which was the decision to perform a large number of air raids over England in an attempt to weaken the country and make it easier to invade it. So while the attacks did a lot of damage, they didn't result in the Nazi Empire gaining any more land or resources, because the Nazi Empire decided not to invade England, which was a huge waste in resources. And so instead of doing all these air raids, they could have instead formed a blockade around England with their U-boats and aircraft, which could have cut England off from the rest of Europe and allow them to better conquer Europe and, develop more resources, which would allow them to better invade England eventually. But the next act I want to talk about is the invasion of Africa, which was Hitler's attempt to expand south and gain a whole new continent, which was very ambitious and pretty arrogant. But this whole new plan of his would require another army to try and take a whole new land, which had a whole new environment to it, which caused obvious problems. But it also required him to devote one of his best generals to the effort, General Rommel. So instead of going into Africa, Hitler could have used those troops to better defend Italy, which eventually fell to the U.S. troops and caused big problems for Hitler later on, because it allowed the Allied troops to get into southern Europe. But the next act I want to talk about is how the Nazi Empire continued to support Japan after they attacked the U.S. at Pearl Harbor. This was a big deal because Pearl Harbor was the first time anyone had attacked the U.S. in this war, and it kind of allowed them to enter the war. But obviously the U.S. entering the war was very, very bad for Nazi Germany, because it kind of reinvigorated the Allied war effort. And the U.S. was also attributed greatly to Nazi's eventual fall. But instead of supporting Japan, they could have denied their support to the country, and maybe avoided fighting the U.S. for a while, which would allow them to better conquer the lands which they've already gained. which would have helped them a lot. But the final act I want to talk about is the initiation of martial law and construction of Holocaust camps in any areas that were conquered by the Nazis, which was meant to discipline the locals and bend them to their will, to the Nazis' will. But this was a big problem because it required troops to be stationed in all conquered areas as well as in these Holocaust camps to make sure that the laws were upheld, and which was a big deal because it created another war front, but this time it was being fought at home, which Hitler had quite a few war fronts. But this ended up hurting the Nazi Empire because it kind of tarnished their kind of I guess worldview, or their world opinion. And kind of, now they're known as slaughterers of people. But yeah, so this is what eventually happened to the Nazi Empire. They kind of got overrun from all sides because they created so many enemies and underestimated so many people, and they eventually fell because of Hitler's arrogance. But it's, this is one instance where I do believe we should all be thankful for someone being overly arrogant, because it allowed us to it allows us to live in the world that we all live in right now, and we don't live in one that looks like this. But thank you. This is my presentation. I hope you liked it. Hope it was better than the other one. Here are my reference slides.